Driving is the most dangerous thing that we do every day, but we realize that you and your family have things to do and places to go. At Safe Ride for Kids, our mission is to help you arrive safely by equipping you with innovative products and access to unbiased information from our team of certified safety experts. I'm Greg DeRocher, co-founder and CEO of Safe Ride for Kids. Safe Ride for Kids is my second career. My first career was as a firefighter paramedic, and that's where I got to witness the devastating results that car crashes can have on individuals and families. Today we're here to talk about one of our products called the Tummy Shield. The Tummy Shield is a seatbelt positioning device for pregnant women. Now, before we started selling it, we got introduced to the Tummy Shield by the manufacturer, by the gentleman who invented it, and we really weren't sure how big of a problem it was, and that's what I want to talk about next. As a paramedic, I knew that the seatbelt and a pregnant woman, car crashes and pregnant women were a bad combination, but I didn't know how often it happened. So we started digging into the studies that were available. And what we found is one study from the University of Michigan had determined that pregnant women are involved in about 170,000 car crashes every year. Now, of those, the numbers get a little fuzzy on how many actually result in a lost pregnancy. You know, how often do we lose the baby? The studies range from several hundred a year to several thousand a year. At Safe Ride for Kids, we've chosen about 3,000 as the number that we use, but we do believe that that is a conservative number. Part of the problem is that there's no tracking mechanism in the medical documentation to determine if there was a lost pregnancy as a result from the car crash. And there's deeper reasons that we could get into. But right now, let's just stay focused on how does the seatbelt actually work? And that's what we're going to be doing with Miss Bones, our lovely assistant here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to buckle up the seatbelt as if this were a normal trip in the car. So what you're going to notice is that the seatbelt is designed to contact the strongest points of the body, the rib cage and shoulder, as well as you'll notice the hips here are being engaged by the seatbelt. Now you and I as adults, we have nice, big, well-defined hip bones right here. And that's actually where the lap portion of the seatbelt is intended to engage with you and I. The problem, however, when a woman is pregnant, the uterus is right here in this area of the anatomy of the body. And as the pregnancy gets bigger, the uterus and the baby tend to push the seatbelt out in front of those hip bones. Now that's A, uncomfortable, but B, in a crash, this seatbelt is going to want to create a straight line between the two hip bones. So if we imagine the occupant sliding forward into the seatbelt, you can see how the seatbelt seeks to create a straight line right here. Now the problem is not only is the soft tissue there going to get compressed, but there's also a very narrow gap. In the average woman, it's about 2.5 to 3 inches between the straight line between the two hip bones and the inside of the spinal column. And you can see that right here, that it's a very narrow gap. So obviously you could imagine if the baby is in that space, it's not going to go well during a crash. And a crash happens in a fraction of a second. One study showed that during the 9 months of pregnancy, the fetus, the baby, the developing baby, was at 5 times the risk of being fatally injured during the 9 months of pregnancy, as opposed to the 9 months after they're born, when they're properly using a certified child restraint system. So we can see that this seatbelt is the first outside force that can negatively impact the baby during pregnancy. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to switch out the mannequins, and then I'm going to introduce you to the Tummy Shield. So give me just a minute and we'll take care of that. So this is the tummy shield, and this is what it looks like when you pull it out of the box. It's about 1.5 inches thick, but it's made of a foam cushion, but inside is a stainless steel plate, single piece stainless steel with this anchor point here that's designed to capture the seatbelt between the legs of the occupant. We're going to show you how it works, but first, let me install it in what it would look like in your car. This portion here is designed to move this anchor point forwards or backwards in relation to the occupant. So it's on there and it can be added or removed as needed. So this buckle is going to go around the back of the vehicle seat and buckle in. Now keep in mind, buckle is not to help restrain you, it's to restrain the product, especially if it's not being used. The next thing that we're going to do is grab the mannequin and position the mannequin. But this is what the tummy shield looks like in the car. And I'll just do a quick demo of what putting the seatbelt on actually looks like without an occupant. So you're going to use the vehicle seatbelt just like you normally would. The next step is to just put some slack into the lap portion, and then it's going to come down between the legs of the occupant and slip right into this anchor point. This anchor point is about 7 pounds of stainless steel plate that is engineered and crash tested to make sure that it can withstand the severe crash forces that it's going to experience in a crash. It's been tested to be at least as strong as the seatbelt itself. Okay, so we now have our mannequin here who's going to help us demonstrate what the tummy shield looks like when it's being used. So we're still using the vehicle seatbelt, like I said before, to restrain the occupant. The job of the tummy shield is to reposition the lap portion of the seatbelt so that it's not impacting the pregnancy here. So the next step is to just introduce some slack into the lap portion and then slip it into that anchor point down between the legs. Final step is to snug the seatbelt up on the occupant. You can see here now that the occupant is still properly restrained by the seatbelt on the shoulder and the ribs. The lap portion is actually restraining the occupant by the femurs, which are the largest bones in the body, and the seatbelt is no longer going to impact the pregnancy by going hip to hip. You can see here, if I push forward in a crash, this occupant is going to slide forward. You can see that the occupant is still properly restrained, but the crash forces are redistributed to the legs and no longer are affecting the pregnancy. So that's the tummy shield and how it works. The next thing we're going to talk about are some tips that you should be thinking about for safe driving while you're pregnant, whether you're using the tummy shield or not. First and foremost, if at all possible, you want to be a passenger. The reason for that is the steering wheel is another outside object that can impact the baby in not a very good way. So by being a passenger, we're going to remove that from the equation. Whenever possible, move your seat back from the airbags, whether you're the driver or the passenger. We want to get some distance between you and those airbags so that the airbags that are inflating very, very fast don't hit the baby in the pregnancy. Lastly, when at all possible, avoid distractions. Distracted driving, sleepy driving, those kinds of things result in a higher number of crashes. And if we can avoid the crash altogether, that's even better. Oh, last thing. If your steering wheel does tilt, if you do need to drive, see if you can tilt that steering wheel to be pointed up more towards your face and not coming out this way into the baby. Okay, so here's a look at the tummy shield again. I mentioned before that this little tab right here is how we position and make sure that this anchor point is in the right spot in relation to the occupant. So this tab right here should be right at the crotch level, which puts this anchor point at the right position so that that seatbelt is positioned correctly on the legs. There are other products on the market that claim to do the same thing that the tummy shield does, and we're going to talk about those in a minute. But one of the things that they do is they move this anchor point way too far forward, which would result during a crash of the occupant flying forward or sliding forward until they hit that seatbelt, till all of that distance is covered. So by keeping this anchor point close to the body, we're going to minimize that travel distance. Okay, so in my left hand is an example of some of the other products that you can find on the market. This particular one actually moves the seatbelt about 4 to 6 inches forward towards the knees. So in a crash, the occupant is going to slide forward until they hit that seatbelt. And then, it's made of plastic. Manufacturer says it's rated to a couple 100 pounds of force. The reality is that during a crash, the restraining forces are measured in the thousands of pounds of force. In my right hand are the internal components of the tummy shield. This is about 7-8 pounds of stainless steel plate, and it's single piece cast construction, and it's been engineered and crash tested to withstand the severe forces that are experienced during a crash. The other thing that we mentioned before is the anchor point is nice and close to the torso, minimizing the distance that the occupant's going to move. So at the end of the day, you really want to do your homework and do your due diligence, because this is an unregulated market, meaning there are no federal standards yet. We'd like to get that accomplished, but there are no federal safety standards regulating these. So it's kind of the wild, wild west. Anything is legal to sell, but you as the consumer have to decide if you want, a few ounces of plastic or a stainless steel crash-tested safety device to protect you and your unborn baby. Okay, so there's one more thing we wanted to talk with you about today, and that's the conversation with you and your OB about driving in the car while you're pregnant. What the studies have shown is that about half of OBs talk to their patients about the best practice recommendations for driving in the car. When they interviewed women, only about 27% of women remember their OB talking to them about the best practice recommendations during pregnancy. The reality is that most OBs probably have never heard of the tummy shield. So you might be in a position of needing to inform them of the problem. There was a study where the conclusion of the study was that seatbelts and pregnancy is the missing stage of car seat safety, and that it needs to be addressed. Our opinion is that the tummy shield is the only product on the market that appropriately and safely addresses repositioning that seatbelt. We have a ton of information on our website, and we'd be happy to answer any questions your OB has. We also have a white paper that we can send out to help inform them of what we shared with you today, and links to the studies that we're citing, and we're happy to share that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at saferideforkids.com.